For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all seen here in the transfer portal over the last few weeks and just what he's trying to identify in terms of these teams that are doing it right and doing it wrong in terms of being able to find good ads in the transfer portal. And we're going to be chatting with him about some of these teams that are looking to go in a little bit of a different direction in their style and how sometimes that causes for volatility, both in terms of the positive and the negative of these teams, and just the teams that are getting it right in the transfer portal. So we'll be chatting with that about him in the next few minutes, and then in the final segment, I'm going to give you guys a recap of all the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and we did not get in any of those Twitter/X questions, and I do implore you to fire those in because we've got a lot of offseason to go through, and I do want to know what you guys want to be hearing a little bit more of on this podcast. Please let me know there, but I will let you know that we've got everything powered by EdgeBoost today. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds 24/7, 365 on leap years, 366 days out of the year for whatever they need it for, because this is an account that you're able to use for anything that you'd like. It doesn't run on credit or anything like that. And when you go to edgeboost.bet and you utilize the promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G, you get a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit of $25. Now let's chat with our good friend Ryan McIntyre, doing such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with our good friend Kobe Dant. I know that those two guys are hard at work night in, night out, taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love, getting set on the football front as well. He also does the Ryan and Rush show that is all about West Virginia athletics, and you're able to follow Ryan on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled M-A-C. And Ryan, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Greg. Always good to talk college hoops. Yep, portal combat, let's go.
Absolutely. We have been seeing just so much happening in the portal in general over the last few weeks. And I'm not sure about you, but what I'm noticing right now over the last few days is it does feel like the mid-majors are finally starting to get up on the board and starting to finally get some guys, because we noticed that early on, a lot of these guys were getting that money from these Power 5 schools. They were getting that money from the schools that you knew had a lot of funds, but it does feel like the mid-majors over the last few weeks have been able to step up because now they're able to offer more playing time, whereas a lot of these Power Conference schools that they've got their starting 5 set up and now they're looking for depth, they're just not able to do so at this point.
Absolutely, Greg. And I also think as we get closer, the draft, we start getting some validation on that. The draft list come out, see Alex Caravan come back. So I think roles are getting more defined at these high majors, less spots on those rosters, and a lot of guys looking around going, where can I go play for a year and then maybe jump to a nice, let's say, Big East or Big 12 SEC school to make a bag of cash the following year.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that that's a big key in this day and age. And I'm not sure if this is something that you're looking at, but I do feel like more of these high school prospects, more of these like fringe top 150, top 200 guys, they are considering more of these mid-majors as well, because I think that you'd agree with me. Pretty much the model in this day and age of college basketball is looking to have a bunch of guys that are juniors, seniors, what have you, but there's still a whole freshman class that they're looking for minutes, what have you, and these mid-major schools are able to offer a freshman many more minutes if they're like a number 150 guy, like fringe top 100 guy, something like that, whereas a power conference school is not able to do so. I think that that's been a place where the mid-majors have been able to strike, a place where I thought that 5 years ago you'd never expect to see some of these guys going. They're not landing some of these guys.
They really are, and I think a lot of it has to do, Greg, too, is that the fifth year COVID, for the most part, is done, other than maybe Chad Baker-Mazara. And I say that.
I think he's on his 15th COVID year.
Exactly. I think that we're going to see that more often. And then guys, like you said in our previous question, is that you can play at a mid-major, then jump to a high major or Power Four, and you can get that bag of cash your sophomore, junior year. And in the end, I mean, yeah, the cash up front is nice short term, but the end goal is to get to the NBA because that's where the real money is. And getting to that second contract in the NBA for a lot of these guys, I think, need to take into account that, yes, that nice $2-3 million, but in the end, the big money's in that second deal in the NBA.
Yep, I'm right there with you, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He's joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Show, and I do think that is very intriguing. And something else I've been noticing a little bit more of as well is these teams are just trying to find these guys that are going to be able to fit their system. Like with Abilene Christian, you know that's a team that's going to be pumping up the tempo. They're going to be looking to generate a lot of turnovers. Obviously, where you are, West Virginia, with bringing in Russ Hodge, who was very good over at North Texas, they're going to be looking to play a slow, methodical style. So essentially what West Virginia was last season, and he's been able to find these guys. How much do you take a look at just the style that a guy is coming from versus where they're going? Because I think that some of these guys have played in very much a slow tempo style, like a guy, if he was, for example, playing at North Texas last year, trying to go to Alabama, I think that would be a little bit of a difficult fit for them. But a guy that was at, like, say, Virginia last year, going on over to West Virginia, for example, I think that that's something that you want to take a look at, because the guy going from Virginia to West Virginia, I think would be able to fit that system really well.
I completely agree, Greg. And another thing I think is, and you see this more and more, I think programs are really, and coaches are really valuing if you came from a winning program. And I think winning translates whether you're going from the mid-major to the high major. And we've seen teams have a lot of success taking more shots on these mid-major transfers that come from winning. Grant McCasland comes to mind. Ross Hodge is trying to duplicate that. Ironically, that is his mentor from North Texas. So I think it's a great way to look at it, and winning does translate. So that's another thing I'm keeping an eye on this offseason.
Yeah, but I do think that that's such an interesting part of it as well. And that's a big reason why I've been such a stand for these guys that were really good at the Division II, Division III level. They get a chance at the Division I level. I'm not sure how you take a look at the coaching cycle this offseason, but I'm a little bit surprised that there weren't more Division II coaches that got plucked out, because we saw what Mike DeGeorge was able to do at Cal Poly, because we both know this. Cal Poly, low-key, was one of the worst teams in all of college basketball for a decade plus, and they were at the very least respectable last year. Made the Big West semifinals of that conference tournament. We've seen it with a school like CSUN. Obviously, you've got more of a case like a Josh Schertz going out over to Indiana State. I think that could be a model that a lot of these mid-major schools are looking for when they don't have as many resources, as much funding, what have you. Looking at these D2, D3 guys, I think could be a route that they should be taking a little bit more.
Well, and just look at Ben McCollum. I mean, Ben McCollum takes his whole team from Division II up to Drake, and they win 30 games. Now he takes them to Iowa, and I expect them to win again. So, yeah, back to my point, winning does translate, and I think a lot of these coaches are really valuing that, and I agree with that approach.
Yep, right there with you. And I mean, even some of these guys that were part of that Nova Southeastern team that won the title a few seasons ago, a guy like a Jonathan Pierre, and the impact that he was able to make at Belmont, I think that speaks to it so much as well. And I do think that is very interesting to take a look at in college basketball, because as we know, the mid-majors, they need to get a little bit more crafty. They aren't going to be able to pluck away at Ben McCollum, for example, this offseason, because Iowa was willing to give him a lot of money. He had a lot of ties there. So, I mean, that was very much a natural fit. And how do you take a look at things in this day and age for these mid-major teams that they don't have the pockets to be able to compete with the SEC, the Big 12, what have you, but it does feel like they do have other resources, i.e. playing time, to be able to bring in some talent and at the same time try to compete with these big dogs.
Another thing is, too, Greg, is styles makes fights, and a lot of the time I think that guys are looking for fit, like we were just talking about, and it's just fascinating. I feel like we're so new into this portal. We don't exactly know, or there's an exact science. We have an idea, but each year I think we get a different data point, and then I change my idea. So I'm trying to be a little bit more conservative on trying to declare a side of the way to do it. But I think the D2 route's a good route. I think guys from winning programs, and then just overall, whether they play slow, fast, shoot threes, inside, those are things I'm looking at.
Yep, I think that's very good to be taking a look at as joining me on the show. We do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such a great job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I know that we've talked about this in the past, and I feel like you're in the exact same club that I am. I absolutely love these mid-major teams that you just mentioned it. Try to have a little bit of a different style, try to have a little bit of a different approach. These teams that they generate a billion steals, they play the Havoc style. I absolutely love those sorts of teams. And how do you take a look at some of these teams that might be in a conference where they're looking to zag rather than zig? Because I still remember when Josh Schertz went on over to Indiana State, everyone in the Missouri Valley Conference was a slow team. Like every single team, he decided to speed up a few years later. All of a sudden, there he is having his team at the top of the Missouri Valley Conference, and he gets a job over at St. Louis. I always think that that's an interesting approach as well. It's not necessarily that you have like a style that's distinct across all of college basketball. I think that looking at the conference, like out there in the Southland, everyone's trying to generate turnovers. Just doing something different from the other teams in the conference is something that I very much value, and I do feel like you can agree with me on this as well. It either booms or it busts, and typically there's not a lot of in between.
I mean, we were a perfect example at West Virginia, Greg. We went press Virginia. Everybody else was a half-court team, but we were like, let's speed it up, be different, and it was really effective. And then our year at South Carolina, we went to the Final Four. We were different that year as well. Yeah, I'm with you, man. If I'm looking at it, I think Jared Calhoun did it in year one at Youngstown, different with that zone. It was a different dynamic than all the other teams see. Because when you play different, nobody can prepare for you. And when you see a team for the first time, you always have the advantage.
Yep, no doubt about it. And I think that that's always something very valuable to be taking a look at. And I absolutely love these teams that they are going to be looking to go a little bit different. Now, Stephen F. Austin, they need to get a little bit more three-point shooting in order for that pressure defense to be able to really to excel. And I do think that what has been working out in terms of some of these mid-major teams have been some of the things I've been talking about before, because I think that one of the great success stories over the last few seasons has been the Big West. And out there in the Big West, a lot of these teams, they value good, solid defense. They maybe aren't going to have the most succinct style in the world, though. UC San Diego, we saw what they were able to do this last season under Eric Olin, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to be able to do over at New Mexico. But I do think that they're a very good blueprint for some of these mid-majors in this day and age trying to bust through, because I think that a lot of people want to call the mid-major dead after what we saw this last season, after we saw a very chalky NCAA tournament. I personally thought it was a little bit more of a one-off. I think that the Big West can be a good example to a lot of these other mid-major schools that it is still possible to be very successful in this day and age of college basketball.
Yeah, and Greg, I have a feeling the mid-majors will bounce back in a big way this year. Usually when everybody declares one thing, it usually goes the opposite way the next year. So I'm looking forward to the mid-majors having a bounce-back year. I know they took it on the chin a little bit, and they got some bad seeding. They've had a couple bad seedings. I'm not going to say they oversee the SEC and Big Ten because that's where the money is, but they got to look at how they're seeding these teams as well.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I do think that it is really interesting to just dive in on this front as well, because with regards to declaring one thing, I still remember when people were saying, oh, Andre Curbelo is going to be an All-American, and we saw how that worked out. So, I mean, there are always things that I like to laugh about, but one thing that I think is very interesting is what we've seen this offseason, and in terms of the Big Ten, I've been talking about them the last few days, and I really feel like they've been big winners here in the transfer portal because, for lack of a better term, they've gotten with the program. It felt like for the longest of time, these schools like Michigan State, my beloved Wisconsin Badgers, what have you, they were resistant to hitting the transfer portal. They wanted to be stuck in the 1980s. They finally have decided, hey, you know what? We need to step up to the plate. We need to stick some money into buying up these transfers, what have you. And it's been very successful for them. I'm not sure how you take a look at this offseason, but I really like the moves that so many schools have made out there in the Big Ten, and I feel like they have finally been able to graduate into this day and age of college basketball and are doing a really good job of being able to get this conference back on track.
And I don't want to say the Big Ten's the best league, but I mean, you're looking at it right now. I mean, teams like Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, Indiana. I mean, you go down the list and the newbies like UCLA, Oregon, USC's made a splash. A lot of teams, like you said, upgrading their roster. It's going to be fascinating with all 18 of those teams.
It is going to be, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly, Ryan, we've got a lot of things to juggle in terms of what we're seeing in college basketball right now. Feels like things are starting to slow down a little bit more in terms of the transfer portal. As I was mentioning, a lot of these power conference teams, they've got a lot of things set. But as you know, there's a lot of power conference teams as well that they're reserving a spot or two on the roster for some of these guys that have the NBA draft decisions. I think that that's really going to be one of the biggest dominoes to fall next. What we see in terms of these combine invitations, what we see in terms of the draft lottery in the next few weeks, because there's a lot of guys that are very TBD with regards to this process. And I think that that's always one of the great unknowns of this time of year, where these guys are going to be landing with regards to whether or not they say or go in the NBA draft, because the NIL money has made it to where a lot of these like former fringe first round picks that you knew were going to be a no doubt go on to the NBA sort of guys, a lot of them have been coming back over the last few seasons.
They really have. It's a blessing in disguise. They can make short-term cash and improve their draft stock. So no more do we see the days of guys jumping there too early, which is a good thing. But at the same time, like I said, I hope these guys do have the big picture in mind, the second contract in the NBA, and not chasing a situation that, yeah, it might be a couple more dollars on the front end, but does it really impact you if you're not with a winning team? Because ultimately, guys from winning programs are the ones that move up.
Yep, I am right there with you. And I do think that with regards to these draft decisions, it's going to be very interesting to see what we do get out of some of them. You mentioned it with Alex Karaban. He's just decided that he's not really going to be going through the process. He's going to be going back to UConn. And I think that those are the big things that you do want to be taking a look at right now. These teams are able to gain chemistry, these guys that are able to come back, because I think that a story like Alex Karaban going to UConn, I think that that's more impactful than a double-figure guy that is going to be going to, like, insert your favorite SEC, your favorite Big 12 school here, because being able to maintain that chemistry, being able to have a guy that is very familiar with the Hurley system, I think that that's much bigger than what you're going to find in terms of a splash transfer.
It really is, and I joke about that. There needs to be two categories, guys you added and guys you retained, because the guys you retained are more important, because we see guys take that second year jump all the time, especially if they've been a transfer the year before. So year two, I look for a lot of jumps in some of last year's transfers.
I mean, heck, the fact that Bethune-Cookman gets back Daniel Ruzon, he's going to be going back to Bethune-Cookman, and that backcourt that was so good for them 2 seasons ago, those two guys transferred out of the program. Both of those guys coming back with Jacoby Heady of Central Michigan, deciding that he's going back to Bethune-Cookman. Not to say that this is going to be like a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament or anything like that, because you know the SWAC like I do, but that's a team that I write a big giant star around as perhaps a team that is going to lend a lot of value in the early part of the season. And for a SWAC conference, I believe has had a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament 25 out of the last 26 years. I think that a team like Bethune-Cookman has what it takes to be able to break that mold with all that they're bringing back, because it's a rarity in this day and age that a mid-major program has so much chemistry and so many guys that are familiar with the system in that program.
I mean, Bethune, you don't usually look at guys to return, but Bethune, Reggie Theus, I mean, I'm always a fan of the SWAC, so anytime we can get some retention in the SWAC, it's a good thing.
I'm right there with you. And I do think that brings up something interesting as well, because I know you spent a little bit of time under Frank Martin, and he was over at South Carolina at the time. You guys made that big Final Four run. And that's the topic of boomerang transfers, because Michi Johnson is one of those. Started at Ohio State, went to South Carolina, went back to Ohio State, and now he's back at South Carolina. So this guy has been, not even just a boomerang, because a boomerang only comes back around once. I guess you could call it a double boomerang. You could call it, I guess, whatever you want to call it, from like Mario Kart, where you're going back and forth and everything like that. But how do you take a look at some of these guys that they start at a program, they leave, and then they come back? Because we're seeing that more and more, where these guys realize that what they had was really good and that they should have never left. And I always think that these guys are so interesting, because sometimes it just doesn't feel like that second time around is quite the same as it is the first time.
Yeah, the grass is not always greener on the other side, as they like to say. So, yeah, some guys get humbled, but it's good to see some guys return and take advantage of a new opportunity.
Yep, no doubt. And then with regards to that South Carolina team as well, any expectations for them this year with Michi Johnson coming back? I feel like they've done a great job in the transfer portal. Obviously, when you lose a guy like a Colin Murray Boyles, that does hurt you quite a bit. But all in all, I look at South Carolina, and had they been in any other conference last year, I felt like they probably would have had enough wins to be able to make the NCAA tournament. They just so happened to be out there in the SEC, where it was a total gauntlet. And I like what they've done in this offseason.
I do too, and I'm going to continue to look at that as well and really dive into these teams over the next couple months. I mean, this is a full-time year sport that you got to keep an eye on all the time.
Yes, we do. And I know that you, along with Kobe Dant over there at the College Experience, are doing a tremendous job of doing so, as you've got your eye on everything that's happening with the north of 2,400 guys in the transfer portal. You got your finger on the pulse of a bit of everything. And along the way, you're trying to do some college football, by the way. So I commend you for your efforts there. Love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Greg. You guys can find me over at the College Experience every single night, breaking out college football and college basketball. Appreciate it, Greg.
Absolutely. And Ryan, he does such a tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and WMX. It is that time podcast. They give you a recap of the past 24 hours of college basketball news and notes.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Take a look at this amazing game of college basketball that we all know and love. I know that he is hard at work taking a look at these trillion transfers and trying to decipher what we've all gotten in this great game, so always appreciate him. A big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. So nice they named him twice. Federico is heading on over to Texas A&M. Relatively good rim protector. He had a block and a half per contest over at Pittsburgh 2 seasons ago. Last year, a little bit of a drop off there, but was still rock solid for Texas Tech. He was able to give the team about 5 points, just under 5 rebounds per contest, a little bit over a block per game. Not necessarily going to be some sort of an offensive dynamo, and it's very interesting to see how Texas A&M is building up this roster, because under Buckyball, when he was over at Sam Amford, it was all about generating turnovers. He's brought in quite a few big men. Zach Clements is going to be coming over from Kansas. You've got a nice versatile piece in Mackenzie Mbakbo, who I really think fits his style. You have a guy in Marcus Hill who really doesn't pop it from three-point range, but the likes of Josh Holloway along Jakari Lane, they do a solid job there. So it does feel like a little bit of a mismatch of different guys. So I'm going to be interested to see if he sticks with that same style that he had over at Samford. But that said, I do think that this is going to be a nice rock-solid add for them, and I do think that this one is pretty solid as well. Steph Van Bussel, he was over at Charleston this last season. He is a guy that's able to pop it from three-point range if you need him to. A 6'10" big man, began his career over at St. Louis, and someone who came over from overseas. He has decided that he is going to be going to Duquesne. This could give Duquesne just a little bit more versatility than they've had in past seasons, and I do think that that's something that they have very much been lacking, to say the least. I do think that he's going to be able to give you something down low. I know that he was playing out there in the Netherlands as well, so he's a guy with a little bit of experience at a bit of a higher level, so I do think that this is a relatively solid pickup for them, and I do think that this is a relatively solid pickup as well. As it's looking like PJ Haggerty is going to be going to NC State now. This has not been confirmed or anything like that, but things are trending that way. I'm not going to give out too much in terms of speculation, but from everything that I'm seeing, that might be becoming a done deal within the next few days. So that one I think is a lot of fun. You got Ja'Kai Sanders, who was over at St. Peter's this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Lemoyne. This is a good pickup for a Lemoyne team that, quite frankly, they just need a little bit more Division I experience on their roster. This is going to be year number 3 at the Division I ranks for them. Sanders was only able to contribute about 2.5 points per contest, but has some good versatility. I know that he's a kid from the great state of New York, right around that Lemoyne area, so that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit. I think that this one is going to help out as well. Hassan Abdul-Hakim for Memphis, because they did lose PJ Haggerty. They need to find a way to be able to replace it, and Abdul-Hakim, he's a 6'8", almost point forward. When he was out there last season, was averaging 13.5 points, 6.8 boards, and a steal and a half per contest over at UT Rio Grande Valley 2 seasons ago. He was averaging about 3 assists per contest with north of 12 points per game. He's a guy that's able to shoot in the low to mid-30s from three-point range. I think that this is a really good pickup for Memphis. This is really going to do a nice job of being able to add some versatility for them, and for Memphis, obviously a relatively good transfer haul here in the offseason. I do still have my question marks as to how Mr. Hardaway is going to be able to coach up those guys, because we have seen some hits and we have seen some misses in terms of Memphis, and the big key for Memphis is being able to take care of the ball, as he does come in from a UT Rio Grande Valley team that they did have a little bit of difficulty in terms of their own ball security as well, so that's something that does need to come into mind. But when you're bringing in someone like a Doug McDaniel, when you're bringing in Dante Harris over from Virginia, Sincere Parker, I mean, it does lead to a very, very versatile and a very fearsome team, including Aaron Bradshaw, another upside guy as well. So I do like this ad for them. I do like this ad as well, as you've got Memphis losing Jared Harris. He has decided that he is going to be going to Wyoming. For Harris, he just didn't see a lot of minutes whatsoever when he was over at Memphis. He was a pretty highly touted guy that they just couldn't really find a role for him, because they're bringing in all these 5-star guys by the transfer portal and everything like that. So I do think that this is going to be the benefit of a Wyoming team that really, other than Obi Abjim, you just have not really gotten a lot out of the backcourt in general recently. And for Harris, he was rated by 247 Sports as the number 130 prospect in his class, a class of 2024. So I do think that there's a little bit of upside here, and a guy that should be able to give a little bit more offense to this Wyoming team. And then you did see Major Freeman make a major move. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Charlotte. Last season, very good over at Siena. Came up from the junior college level, a steal, 2 assists, 13 points per contest, relatively solid. with the ball. Now, for Charlotte, they are going to be probably playing that slow, methodical style in Siena, not necessarily a team that plays super duper up tempo. So I think that is going to be a relatively solid fit in terms of scheme there with the Charlotte team. They've done a nice job of being able to address their rebounding issues in the offseason, as well as they've been able to bring over Kulal Mading, who was over at Norfolk State this past season, Anton Bonke, who was over at Providence at 7'2". He's coming in as well, and Damani Harrison, who is a nice three-point shooter over at Southern Indiana, really does fill out this roster. So I do like what I'm seeing there, and I do think that's a pretty solid pickup. Here's another pretty solid pickup, as you've got Brooklyn Hicks, who he was over at Montana last season. He was able to give the team right around about 4.5 points per contest. He's decided to go to UNLV. Now for UNLV, if this is anything more than a depth ad at the moment, then things have went horribly wrong for UNLV, and they probably suffered a lot of injuries because they've got the likes of Al Green, Dre Gibbs, Lawhorn, who are all coming over and everything like that. But just the fact that they're able to fortify this roster with a guy that's able to play legitimate college basketball minutes, I do think that's relatively solid for them, and I think that this one is solid as well. Caleb Smith, he was over at UC Riverside this last season, 11 points, 4.5 boards at 6'9". He is going to be heading on over to Grand Canyon. For Grand Canyon, they've been one of the best teams on the boards in all of college basketball, so you'd like to see Smith become a little bit of a better rebounder, but that said, he's got a little bit more versatility than what we've seen from Grand Canyon in past years in terms of being able to step out, shoot about, for his career, 34.5% from three-point. So I do like the fact that he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife for the team. Probably going to be a little bit more of a reserve for this Grand Canyon team, but still, I do think that's a nice upside add, and I do think that this is a nice add as well. CJ Hines, he was solid over at Alabama State this past season. Shot 38% from three, 14 points, 2.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. He's going to be adding on over to Temple. He fits very well with that Adam Fisher style. Now, the defense can sometimes be a little bit shaky with him, and this is a Temple team that's been a little bit slow going in the transfer portal. They're bringing in Gavin Griffith along with Masai Gilliard as well. They're going to need to add something down low because right now for Temple, they weren't necessarily great on the glass last season, so they're going to need to get a bit more there, but offense and the backcourt appears to be getting fortified a little bit, and this is a guy that was really able to knock it down from 3-point range this past season. Scooter Williams Jr. was a solid junior college guy a few seasons ago, went out over to East Texas A&M and was one of the few guys that performed well for them last season. A little bit over 11 points, 2.5 assists per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Louisiana Tech, and for Louisiana Tech, it's been a bit of a slow process for them in the transfer portal, as a lot of their, shall we say, top-flight guys over the last few seasons have come in via the transfer portal. The fact that they were able to have Daniel Pacho a few seasons ago was really big for them, and for Louisiana Tech, you do have to wonder how things are going to be able to come about for them because they are missing quite a few of those guys that were so good for them a season ago, and quite frankly, it was a Louisiana Tech team that expected a little bit more from last season other than Sir Isaac Heron. These are really the lone two adds for them, so they're going to need a little bit more. I do like this pickup because he does have some versatility. He's able to give you a little bit of something at the point spot, but certainly I do think that this is going to be a case where they're going to need to add a little bit more in order to maximize this. You've got Duke Miles, who he is requesting a release from his NIL over at apparently Texas A&M. He was over at Virginia as well, and he's right now back out there in the transfer portal. He was a guy that was pretty solid last year, averaging 9.5 points per contest, solid 3-point shooter, so that's another guy that's going to be up for grabs, and it is indeed confirmed. I was having this on the podcast about 24 to 48 or so hours ago. Ian Shufflin will be on the Clemson football team. He will not be in the transfer portal. He's actually going to be playing football this season, so some good, clean family fun out there, and this is good, clean family fun as well. NC State transfer Bryce Hurd. He last season just was unable to get out there on the floor in general over at NC State. He's decided that he is going to be going to Dayton, and for Dayton, I feel like this is a case for a lot of these Atlantic 10 schools. They're doing a nice job of both being able to hit the true freshman recruiting front and taking a look at these guys that were relatively highly touted guys, but they just didn't see minutes in year number 1 or year number 2. This is someone that was a top 225 recruit in his class of 2024, according to 247 Sports, a little bit of a 6'5" combo player. I think that that's going to be nice for a Dayton team that's been one of the most prolific offenses in all of college basketball, but has to replace pretty much all of that backcourt from a season ago. This is a squad that had to replace quite a bit from last season as well in Memphis, and they lost PJ Carter. He decides that he is going to be going to LSU after he shot 39% from 3-point range, was averaging in that neighborhood about 5.5 points per contest. This is an LSU team I feel like has actually done a really good job of being able to find a few diamond in the rough sort of pieces, and for this LSU team, I do think that they're going to be able to build some inroads out there in a tough SEC. I don't know if they're going to be able to bust through make the NCAA tournament just because, well, conference is that difficult in general. But that said, I do think that they're trending in the right direction when you're bringing in someone like a Mikel Sutton, who was a top flight scorer over at Omaha. Rashad King was able to do a solid job over at Northeastern. And Deaton Thomas, I thought, was a really good ad from UNLV. It shows that they're bringing in guys that know a little bit about winning. Michael Nwoko, who comes on from Mississippi State, is a solid ad as well. So they're building a well-rounded roster. Question is, are they all going to be able to get onto the same page? And for UC San Diego, I feel like they're doing a really good job given the circumstance as well. When you lose a coach like Eric Olin and you lose a lot of those pieces from an NCAA tournament team, not easy to be able to rebuild from it, but they get another nice ad as Alex Shulkin. He's going to be coming on over after he spent last season out there in the Patriot League. For Shulkin last season, was able to supply Lafayette with in that neighborhood about 13.5 points per contest. He shot 47.9% from three-point range, was an absolute dynamo, and still was relatively solid on the defensive end as well. Not necessarily a guy that's going to give you a lot of rebounding or anything like that, but with the way that this UC San Diego team has brought in Ty Dunn to be their main point guard, Bull Denoy, he was over at Portland. He's going to be able to give you a little bit of rebounding at 6'11". Hudson Ward is a 6'7" combo player. I really think that this UC San Diego team, given the circumstances, is doing a really good job in the transfer portal, being able to add some talent. So do like that pickup for them. You've got Austin Hero, that is of relation to Tyler Hero. He has decided that he is going to be going back to the Midwest. He has decided that he is going to be going to St. Thomas. Just did not see any playing time whatsoever this past season over at South Carolina, but still, this is a guy that was relatively, shall we say, coveted with regards to him being of relation to Tyler Hero. Not necessarily a guy that I think is going to be like completely lifting the top off a team, and I don't think that he's going to be as good as his brother, but this is a St. Thomas team that's built around three-point shooting and is built around really good offense. I think that he could be a solid fit for them, so do like that move. I do like this move as well. Kyle Cuffey Jr., he was over at Syracuse this last season, and he was actually relatively solid when he was over at Syracuse. He was averaging a little bit over 5 points per contest, began his career over at Kansas, a former top 150 recruit. He has decided that he is going to be going to Mercer. For Mercer, they just need a little bit more explosiveness in general this past season. You can tell that things were a little bit more stagnant with regards to that offense, but I do think that this is a really good coaching staff that is starting to get things a little bit more online with them, and I think that this move is a step in the right direction that tells you that they can add some of these bigger guys, because up until this point they had added DJ Smith from Robert Morris, which was a solid add, and Zaire Williams, who he was a big fish in a small pond over in the NEC with Wagner, but being able to get an ad like this, I do think that it really fortifies that backcourt. Probably going to need a little bit more down low, but still, I do think that things are looking relatively solid there. And then for Mercer as well, you've got Baraka Ojai. He was over at Memphis this last season, just was not able to see a lot of minutes in general, but he began his career over at George Mason 2 seasons ago, where he was averaging a little bit closer to 8 points per contest. Not a guy that's going to be like some sort of a super three-point shooter or anything like that, but still, this is a backcourt that they were able to get two really nice ads on Friday, and I do think that both of these guys are going to be able to add quite a bit to the table for them. And for Ojoy, he's someone that did shoot about 43% from three-point range last season. Didn't shoot it as well when he saw significant minutes over at George Mason, but still, do have to love to see that. You've got Des White, who was over at Missouri State this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Oregon State and was rock solid last season. Shot 37% from three-point range, 14 points per contest, was the top scorer over at Austin Peay. And we saw how things worked out last year for Oregon State, and the fact that they brought in a guy in DeMarco Minor who was a little bit of a stat sheet sufferer and a really nice scorer at the mid-major ranks, went up and was able to have instant production. I don't know if it's going to be quite that for Oregon State, but over the last 72 or so hours, Oregon State has done a really nice job of being able to add some pieces. You've got Ore Diaz-Graham, who's coming out over from Pittsburgh. I don't really think too highly of Malcolm Christie, but I know I am an Hauser, true 7-footer that comes over from Coastal Carolina. Some really good ads recently for them. And then Jalen Myers, he has decided that he is going to be going to Hawaii after he had a rock-solid year this last season. Was the lone guy for Norfolk State that averaged more than 5 rebounds, bringing 10.5 points, 5 boards. Not a guy that really lights you up from three-point range at 6'8". He doesn't have that sort of versatility, but still, this is a guy that should be able to help out a Hawaii team that they very much are a bunch that is very much defense-oriented. They're a little bit of a slower, more controlled team. I think that he's going to be able to step in right away, and he's going to be able to give them some relatively nice production. And Texas A&M should also get some production out of Rylan Griffin. This one just came across as well, because I was talking about the fact that they also added Federico for Griffin. He was averaging only about 6.5 points per contest this last year over at Kansas after 2 2 seasons ago at Alabama. He was shooting about 39% from 3, 11 points per game. Just felt like the entire Kansas team last season was a big, unmitigated mess. Him being able to go to this spot, I think is very big for them. Again, I don't know if Bucky McMillan is going to be able to maintain the sort of level of production and the sort of level of play that he had over at Stanford, but still, I think that this is a really good ad for them. And then, George Washington III began his career in Michigan as a top 150 recruit, just has not been able to see the floor at either Richmond or Michigan. He's decided that he's going to be going to Florida Gulf Coast. Did not think that our nation's first president was going to be going on over to Florida Gulf Coast, but I think this is a relatively nice upside ad for them. What he's going to be able to do is a little bit TBD. I think the 3-point shot needs a little bit of work in general, but for Florida Gulf Coast, you have to absolutely love this. It's a Florida Gulf Coast team that's going to be missing quite a few of their pieces from what was a relatively rock-solid team 8 seasons ago, and for Dunk City, their really lone ad up until this point was J.R. Kozinski, but those are 2 really good ads for them, so I do like what they're getting here. Now they need to fill out a little bit more in terms of depth, and Norfolk State, now they have a little bit more down low after I was mentioning this before. Jalen Myers was the lone guy that averaged 5+ rebounds for them 8 seasons ago. Now they bring on Davon Ellis, who last season was solid over at Valparaiso. He, at 6'7", averaged about 4.5 points, a little bit under 3 rebounds per game. When he was at Maryland Eastern Shore 2 seasons ago, 11.5 points, 4.5 boards. Not a guy that's necessarily going to be able to pop it from 3-point range, but Norfolk State always seems to do a relatively solid job in the transfer portal. I like this ad for them. They needed a little bit more rough and tumble down low. Now they're going to be able to get it in for the Norfolk State team. They're the one team out there in the, shall we say, MEAC that I think is going to be really out there trying to spend some money over the next few weeks, bringing in Elijah Jamison and Deion Wright Ford. I felt like was 2 really good ads as well, so do like what they're bringing to the table and do like the addition there. I do like this addition as well as Tyler Betsy, who was over at Cincinnati this past season. He's a former top 75 recruit. Just couldn't get out there on the floor too much last season as he was a forward behind the likes of Aziz Bandango and company. He's decided that he's going to be going to Syracuse. Syracuse won't have Eddie Lampkin for a 500th year of eligibility, so they need to add someone down low for Betsy. Not a guy that's going to be super duper versatile and pop it from 3-point range too much, but a guy that should be able to help out the play down low and should be able to help out the defense in general for this bunch. So I do think that that's pretty big for them, and I think that this is a big one as well. Greg Gecko Gordon, 2 seasons ago at Iona, he was a really good scorer, 16 points, 7.5 boards, shot in the high 30s from 3-point range. Just couldn't get out there on the floor this past year for UAB. He's heading on over to Long Island. Even though Long Island was something to be desired offensively last year, their defense was very rock solid. I do think that adding on the associate coach in Greg Gillen, like they did last offseason, was really able to help them elevate on that front. I do think that this team, being coached by Hot Rod Strickland, who, as we know, he used to play in the NBA, this team has a lot of upside. This is really their first main get in the transfer portal. There is some money over there with Long Island, and I absolutely love this pickup for them, as I know that what he showed over at UAB last season, not the same as what he did 2 seasons ago at Iona, and I think that he returns to that Iona form. You've got Adam Miller heading out over to Gonzaga, a team that's been very silent in the transfer portal. Miller this last year did shoot 43% from 3-point range, but had always been a double-figure scorer throughout his career. We saw that dip to about 9.5 points per contest this past season, and for Gonzaga, they are going to be missing a few guys from these seasons ago, so they need to add a little bit more. This is really the first main gift for them, and I do think that for Adam Miller, while he's going to be solid, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a super-duper elevator for Gonzaga, so it's going to be interesting to see what they get out of him, and it's going to be interesting to see what New Mexico State gets out of Elijah Elliott. Elliott is someone that is very familiar with regards to this portion of the country. He began his career over at UT Rio Grande Valley, and this past season over at Southern Illinois, 14 points, a steal per contest. I was only able to play in 5 games before he had a season-ending injury. When he was over at Grand Valley 2 seasons ago, he was able to give out 3 assists per contest. Not an amazing 3-point shooter, so he'll fit in very well at New Mexico State, because it feels like nobody over at New Mexico State was able to pop it and lock it from 3-point range 8 seasons ago, but a guy that's able to be a relatively solid defender, a guy that's able to be a relatively good distributor as well. I think that this is going to be a solid ad for them, and he fits in very well with Jamel Jones, who comes on over from Cal State Bakersfield. And that'll wrap things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to our good friend Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, think of an idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at GUnit_D1. and keep in mind, Larzium, the email does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Any other way is fine. An Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.